Real estate is a beast. At first I had a heart attack. Real estate is all about relationships, but it really is about your community, and you pretty much know everyone you're working with, and it's very personal. So I quickly learned that it wasn't 3 days a week. People who are critical thinkers, problem solvers, and care are gold to a business owner and someone who's quite ambitious for the business. That's what I look for. This is the challenging part that happened as soon as I stepped up. They're like, well, who's she? She's only been here 5 minutes. And basically when I set KPIs, I literally lost 14 members.
Welcome to the Upshot podcast by Homely, where we invite you into honest conversations with entrepreneurs, challengers, and long-standing legends shaping the real estate industry today. Well, thank you all for joining us on the 5th edition of the Upshot podcast here by Homely. Today, we get to interview a legend of the property management space, Donna Cross from McGrath out in Geelong. Donna's been in the industry for a long time and has a background in media advertising sales, believe it or not. But she's got a very, very high-performing team out there in Geelong. And we look forward to having a chat to her about the rental market. Obviously, there's some challenges out there at the moment, and some of the things that she's done over her career, that have got her to where she is today. Now, Donna, great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me, Ben. I look forward to having a chat with you.
Excellent. Now, obviously, it's a hot topic at the moment, the state of the rental market. We normally start these podcasts with a bit of the property news side of things, but we've spoken to a lot of sales agents. Curious to get your thoughts on the rental side of things at the moment. What's happening out there?
Well, I'm sure that it's different per state, and obviously different in the metro areas compared to the regional areas. And it does change. Anyone in our industry and in the leasing space understands that it actually can change within 6 weeks, within monthly, and usually we have a winter cycle. We've got the winter cycle coming in. Look, we had a purple patch coming out of COVID and throughout COVID. So rental providers at the moment are experiencing just lower interest, a lower amount of attendees to open for inspections, and not as many applications. And look, that's due to people actually staying in their properties because the cost of actually moving, the worry and concern that there's going to be a rent increase, or when they come out to market, they're not actually going to be able to get a property.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in that space. However, the media is saying that there's an abundance of renters out there and not enough properties. So that's really challenging for us in our space to be able to condition and educate our rental providers at the moment.
Yeah, it seems every time I turn on the news, and I think I'm going to stop doing it because it's just so doom and gloom every time I look at it. But it's headline news at the moment. You know, there's always, a segment on someone who hasn't been able to find something. They've made hundreds of applications, but it sounds like it is a little bit different in the actual real world out there at the moment.
Well, I believe that is true for some people who have had poor rental histories. So they've, for us, well, my experience in our agency, obviously we want the ideal renter for our rental providers. And because that's incredibly important, like renter selection is key for everybody. If you have a poor rental history, your likelihood of being successful in any property is minimal. And I believe that they're interviewing people who are in those situations. And look, some of them have come on hardship, some of them have stories. However, when we're looking at applications, we're really looking at making sure we're getting the best renter for our rental providers.
What does a great renter look like from your perspective? Are there any key criteria that you look for?
Oh, absolutely. A great rental provider has paid on time. Routine inspections were always neat and tidy. They were easy to deal with. They were really good at communicating. And that's pretty much, they have a good rental history from other rental providers. Or if there actually has been an issue at vacate, they've actually fixed the issue. Or if there has been issues at routines or a miscommunication, they've actually bridged the gap in that and they've rectified the situation. So regardless of whether they've actually been in arrears a couple of times due to circumstances, they've communicated and rectified that. And we can actually communicate that, because not everyone can be perfect or have a perfect time because of circumstances change. But those are our ideal renters, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if you do communicate from a tenant's or renter's standpoint that things aren't going to, payments aren't going to come through on time, that's a much better position to be in than being chased by your property manager and going silent. So, yes.
Absolutely. So that's a recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we spoke off air about the changes to the legislation, and I promised I wasn't going to make this a political conversation, but how are you finding things with the changes to the legislation over the last couple of years?
Two parts to this.
Yeah.
I'll finish on a positive. First part was the timing of the new legislation coming in after a moratorium and after the COVID situation was not ideal for agencies, for property managers, and for the market, to be honest. Due to there being a moratorium, we couldn't increase rents, we couldn't evict tenants who weren't paying. When you bring in the new legislation that has costs involved, in fact, a lot of costs involved that weren't budgeted by rental providers or investors, plus maybe being without rent or having, situations that were really stressful for them, was really, really difficult. With regard to my agency, so I'll speak from the agency's point of view, staffing and just them being burnt out from, helping people and dealing with the issues that came with COVID, and then going into a legislation space. So learning the legislation and then educating the rental providers and the renters on that legislation who had no idea. They only heard what was on the news, which was very minimal and, not that accurate. So dealing with all of those things was incredibly challenging. So we lost a lot of property managers from that. So then having, short staff and then people who were here being overloaded, me included, was, not ideal at all. But in terms of the legislation itself, this is the positive, this is the second part, absolutely incredible. Really clear boundaries, very easy for us to give advice to a rental provider, and for them to actually understand what their obligations are, and for our property managers to say, this is what it is. This isn't my advice. This isn't me just thinking that this is the way it is. I have to give you this advice. I need to help you find a way to get this done within the time period, and it has to actually be done for us to be able to rent your property out. That has been really good for my team and also really good for me. I'm not a black and white person, but in this regard, with regard to process, fantastic. And also the safety of the properties and for the renters going in, and for the property managers being able to morally do the right thing. Whether back in the past, a rental provider would be say, well, I'm just not doing that regardless. That would weigh heavily on my property managers. And that's when you can actually lose property managers from the industry.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. The legislation certainly has brought a lot of rental properties up to a much better standard. It means generally I would have thought that there's going to be less work during the tenancies, particularly with the gas and electrical safety checks. Yes, we're in agreement on that. The one thing that I found strange, particularly coming out of the moratorium and the amount of VCAT cases that have been backing up over the years, they made it
Still backed up.
Well, this is the thing though, right? I mean, they made it so that you have to go to VCAT for basically everything under the legislation. So they've just meant that there's more cases building up. So we'll probably be here for the next 10 or 15 years before we clear through that cycle, but it is what it is, right?
Well, you could see it that way. And look, yes, at first that was, that weighed on me, like as an owner of the business, and being responsible to rental providers and, trying to get them their compensation and all of the things that they need, and knowing that, a lot of them actually needed that money, like it was a real thing. But now that I actually know that that's how the process is, now I'm teaching my team about negotiation, teaching them how to give information for a rental provider to make an informed decision that actually is best for them, like in a monetary way. And now rental providers are actually starting to understand it's not the agency telling them that, it actually is legislation, and they're having those experiences themselves. So instead of saying, oh, we'll have a hearing in 6 weeks' time for a $400 compensation claim, and they perhaps get $200 because of depreciation, and I say, well, that will probably be heard in 2 years' time, possibly better to move on.
Yeah. Yep, that's true. That's true. In terms of, so let's move on to your career, because we want to get an understanding as to where you started, your journey through the space, obviously coming up to being a business owner of a very, very successful office. Can you run me through a little bit about your career to date?
Yes, so I will try to be brief. I was working, like you said, I was working as an advertising rep. I also wrote a body and soul feature and wrote for the local paper. And my husband and our business partner, who's also a very close friend of ours, got an opportunity to buy into a Ray White business. We're now McGrath. And at some point I thought, do you know what? I'd love to work 3 days. And I reckon I could actually do that. And the boys go, oh, you'd be great. Because I also had like a sales sort of role in the advertising. And I was a team leader also. So I was thinking, oh, it'd be a breeze. And then I came into real estate. My husband used to always say, oh, I've got no time for this. And I said, it's all time management. You should get your PA to do this. And then I realized real estate is a beast. Because real estate is all about relationships, but it really is about your community, and you pretty much know everyone you're working with, and it's very personal. So I quickly learned that it wasn't 3 days a week, and so my first role was the boys thought, do you know what? I think, Donna, you'd be great in a new client consultant role. So that's like new business, bringing on new business. And I did very, very well, which was very surprising to me. And I look back and wonder how investors gave me their business. But it was because I was incredible. I think it was because I was authentic. So the things that I didn't know, I'd say I'm going to go back to the office, and I've got a specialist in the office who can answer those questions. But I was very good at product knowledge. So what I did that was probably different to other property managers out there at the time, where they were doing everything, I was just doing new business. So I learned what our product was, which was our team and our services, and I sold them. And I was lucky enough to have a really good team. They had a really good team who were really caring and followed those processes at that time. So I would sell those processes. What ended up happening over time was that we grew quite quickly because I was putting on more properties. So as we did that, we just didn't have the capacity for them to actually do the tasks correctly, or get them all done, in a time period. And there was no one there setting KPIs to actually make them accountable for everything that was being done. So everyone was just doing their best. I started to realize this, and because I was a team leader and I was used to structure and accountability, when I learnt this, at first I had a heart attack, and I was just so upset that I was selling to people and morally and obviously I felt an obligation to them because it's their money. That's when I started stepping in and saying, look, why don't we have KPIs? This is the challenging part that happened. As soon as I stepped up, they're like, well, who's she? Just because she's the wife. She's only been here 5 minutes. And basically when I set KPIs, I literally lost 14 members. And I wasn't a property manager. So this is the story you wanted to hear that was painful.
Yeah.
And truthfully, it was harrowing because I wasn't a property manager, but I learned pretty quickly. So what I did is I learned all of the tasks, learnt what they did. And at that time, it was very different. You could go to a routine inspection, take a couple of photos, immaculate. Oh, needs a little bit of this and that. So at that time, it wasn't as challenging for me to learn how to do a condition report and that, because it's not as intense as it is now, which it should be. So learned all of the tasks, and then hired people to come through. That was another challenge for me. I hadn't been in HR before. I hadn't hired before. So I just hired people who seemed nice. I had no idea really how to hire people for that particular role, what their personality was for that, because I was a salesperson. So I liked people who were like me. That was also wrong and challenging. So I also hired people who weren't right for that position, and then learnt that they weren't. And then also having to let people go or self-manage them out of the business. That was incredibly challenging. But as time went on and I grew in confidence, I attracted better people. And at that time I was still growing, because I have a really strong relationship in the community through working through the local newspaper. So there was about 100 people who worked there. Also Jim had relationships, and the boys were very successful in sales, which, you being in property management, you would know a lot of sales do go to investors, so they were sending those through. So it was really important to me, and I had a real challenge to go, right, I really need to get this right so that our investors are being taken care of. And from there, I've grown, and I've had certain people come through, thank God, who had the skills that I didn't have, who could actually train the team members in those skills, and then I trained in mine. And I've had people all the way through come and go for us to build to where we are now. And I still have incredible people around me that I'm really grateful for.
So did you just learn it on the go, or did you have a mentor? Because, I mean, there's a lot to learn in the property management space.
So what's so interesting about me is the team who were my mentors.
Okay.
So when they would go and do a task, I would ask questions about it. Okay. Like, so how are you doing that? So I would go out and do condition reports with them, and I go, oh God, wouldn't you do this? And wouldn't you do this? And wouldn't you do this? And wouldn't you do that? So I didn't realize what sort of skill set. My attention to detail is very strong in certain areas, and my team will tell you very weak in other areas. But in terms of things that I think are important and that are risk management involved, I'm all over it. So as I identified things that I thought were risk management, that actually built our best practices as well. But it was from going through them. In terms of mentors, Jerry Keys at Ray White was the first person. I thought I was scared to meet her, because she knew so much, and she was going to see through me that I didn't know anything. And she was so beautiful. And what she actually did is she tapped into the things that I could do well. So we were the first people in Geelong to do advertising of a property management team. Okay. And because I used to write copy and create ads, that's what I did. And then it generated so much. We got in so many properties that in the first 2 years, I was the highest listings person. We had the best property management team, but I knew internally that it wasn't like that. And that's what's so interesting. I know we are now, but I look back and it was an illusion. It was just like, it was chaotic.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. So I came from a sales background, and, you know, me being a sales agent, I was like, you know what, I can change this space. It's easy. I did the business with my wife, and she was the property manager, and she was always a lot more cautious around what was actually going out there. But you learn very quickly on the job is the first thing. And, you know, it's... certainly looking at it from a fresh pair of eyes as well, you do see some of the structural inefficiencies in what was going on. So it sounds like it was very similar in your case, that you saw that things could be changed and improved, and you've obviously applied that to your business as well. So that's very, very impressive. In terms of things outside of real estate, do you have anything that you're really passionate about outside of real estate?
You would know as a business owner that real estate is pretty much your life, because real estate's really your relationships with everyone. So from the real estate space, I've just had so many opportunities to be involved with so many incredible people who are doing inspiring things, and I feel really grateful, genuinely feel really grateful to be a part of, get the opportunity to work with people like Geelong Mums here in Geelong. I think there's a St Kilda branch as well. They're just so generous, and so we've worked with each other on some projects that they weren't doing, that I wanted to be aligned with them, and they allowed that. There's also the Geelong Young Professionals here that we have that are just incredible group of people. You get to go to a lot of events and meet a lot of people. my family, and also like my family's very lucky. I said this to you earlier. My children are very lucky enough to have really good friends with parents who are also just incredibly inspirational that we get to be around. So we get to go to events and be inspired. But to be quite honest, real estate and my family and my team are pretty much my life, and I don't really have much time outside of that because it's all interconnected.
No.
That's all I
Do you
can
know
say
what?
about that.
It all makes sense to me. I used to refer to my business as my nagging child because I could never get a rest. It was always at me. But there you go. I totally understand where you're coming from on that front. But
Well, intuitively, you would know. You know that you just need to tweak here and do this and do that, and you want to, and you feel it. But that is very time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to understand a little bit more about your team because you've obviously won a number of awards in the space, Rate My Age and all those sorts of things. What do you look for in a great property manager? How do you build out your team? And just give us a bit of a rundown on, I guess, how you structure things.
That has changed over time.
Yeah.
And it really depends on the timing. So I'll give two parts to this too. So one of the parts is when I'm growing. So when I've got an opportunity for a new person to come into the space because of growth. And I've had like a foundation and a structure, and I've had a team member staying for quite some time, which is the ideal situation, which happens from time to time, which you just hold on to and you're grateful for because there are ups and downs with that. So that space is I'm actually looking for a person who is caring. Like when I'm interviewing a person, someone who's genuine, someone who's caring, someone who can communicate like articulately. And what I mean by that is when I ask them a question, they can actually give me a story and articulate what they mean.
Yep.
I've found that that's really important to me, and people who have done that are an extension of me in terms of I can teach them the tasks and they pick them up. But when they're actually talking with rental providers and renters, they're genuine, they genuinely care, and they get issues and challenges resolved quite quickly. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for someone who's moving into the new space, and someone who's like enthusiastic, because anyone who's in property management or anyone who's an owner, if you've got a lot of new properties, we would list 25 to 30, which is uncommon, by the way, each month. To take on that amount of new listings when they're coming on, and the challenges of building new relationships and the challenges of, the tasks that need to be done sequentially in a certain amount of time, there's deadlines around that, is very challenging, especially when they're new to the space. So I generally want someone who's been in property management, but not particularly someone who is experienced in all aspects.
Okay.
That's new business.
Yep.
I'll take a drink and I'll say
okay.
The next one is when I'm looking for a senior property manager, I'm looking for a problem solver. I'm looking for someone, and what I look for now, so that I can be what I need to be for the team and for the business, I'm looking for someone who is going to take time away from me. So anyone who is a problem solver, who is a critical thinker, is the person I'm looking for in a senior property manager, because I don't need escalations coming to me. Obviously, I'm there, I'm supportive, I'm going to train, I'm going to mentor. But people who are critical thinkers, problem solvers, and care are gold to a business owner and someone who's quite ambitious for the business. And for me to be able to get to those parts and to do what I need to do, that's what I need in a senior property manager. That's what I look for.
That's brilliant. A classic example, when power goes out and you've got someone that can actually solve a problem without needing to get an electrician out. Like, how many times does that happen? And the value that you bring to your client when you do those sorts of things, rather than being on the reactive and just getting someone out there and costing them a lot of money. These are the sorts of things that are going to be very positively reflected in your business, and obviously on you as the business owner. So I couldn't agree more with that. In terms of the industry, it seems like there's a lot of people leaving. I was reading an article the other
There
day.
are.
Yeah, I think about 35% of the industry have left. Do you think that this is in part due to the
Oh
changes?
my God, you've added another 5%.
Oh, was it? Okay, maybe I misread it.
Yes, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. It actually makes sense. The last time I think, like you were talking about the news earlier,
Yeah.
I think I've sort of switched off. So yeah, it's probably raised to 35%. You're quite right. And look, it's not for everyone. This career is not for everyone. And we just went to a legislation training with the amazing Leah Kalman. And if you reading this or listening to this, if you're in property management, please go to one of her trainings. If you want to know about legislation, empower yourself so that you can actually have really good conversations with your rental providers and add value.
Yeah.
We went to that and I was thinking to myself, you know, I'll talk about like there's been so many pay rises in property management. The reason for that, what we need to be across in terms of legislation, it's not about being across the information. It's actually about relaying that in layman's terms, but in a way that is stomachable. Is that a word?
No, I feel you. Yeah, that works.
It's like be able to be creative enough to work with each personality that you have and rental provider that you have to give them that information so that they can make an informed decision and know what they need to do in that space. Also, if they're in a challenging space and a renter is wanting to do something, being able to say, well, do you know what, section such and such and such and such, we'll go this road. But you know what, we won't only just do that. We're going to put in section this, 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 and this, and then we're actually going to also try this, this, and this. Now, if this doesn't work, we'll do this. If this doesn't work, we'll do this. That's what my team are doing. Like they're not just going, I know that this is what you can do. You can do this or this.
Yeah.
It's to be a professional in anything you do, and to be at the top of your game, which we have been for such a long time. You need to be an expert in legislation. You need to be an expert in every single task that you do and do it to best practice and to the business's best practice. You need to be a really good team member.
Yep.
And you need to be there for your team. It really is a specialist career now.
Yeah. Knowledge is power, right? So the more that you know, the more you understand, the more commanding it's going to be.
And the more you know, you don't know, but the more you want to know.
Exactly. Do you think, when the legislation changes came in, I would have thought that it was about 20% extra, maybe even more, 30% extra work on top of what you already had to do. Do you think that that's a fair assessment, or do you think that that's changed? And I guess that commands higher wages for the property management staff.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and look, I'll speak from the heart here. Because I was in survival mode and I was in, right, I need to drive this. I need to build energy around this. I need to, it has to actually happen.
Yeah.
And that's where I was at in terms of all of that. So in terms of whether it was 30% or 20%, I didn't even look at it or think about it. I just built structures and processes and said, this is what we're going to do. This is the time we've got to do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is the amount of people we've got. And lucky enough for me, the team that I had around me did it. I look back on it and I just can't believe that we did it and we had it. The challenge was, we were across that because I was a mental case working till 1 o'clock in the morning and then thinking of something at 3 o'clock in the morning and then putting it all together, then having meetings, then having a Zoom. Then I was like, yeah, this is happening.
Yeah.
The team were all over it. But what the problem was, the compliance teams, all of these people who were like, yeah, I want to make money and yeah, I'm ready for it and yeah, I'm ready for you. They weren't ready. They didn't have the infrastructure. They didn't have the back end. When I talk about back end, their account systems, their portals and all of that. I mean, and I'm not judging them or calling anyone out here. It was just a dog's breakfast. So we were all ready and prepared as much as we could. And then we had people letting us down, and property managers and people like me, we don't like that at all. And that's very stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly the companies that you're referring to. They didn't have the infrastructure in place to support it, but I think we made a few.
They've improved apparently, but I haven't given them another chance.
Okay, good.
So what we did, we went locally. So we ended up going locally, and I split it between 3 different places.
Yeah.
And that really worked for us, and we're really happy with the decision we made. but there were pain points, and my team did go through that, and I appreciate you all. They're not going to watch this, but just I do.
No, I think that there was probably a few instant millionaires in the electrician and gas plumbing space off the back of the legislation as well, which was very, very interesting. But anyway, now, Donna, you have spoken to me previously about the grief cycles. Now, are you able just to explain what you mean by that for all the listeners here today?
Absolutely, I can. So I will give two examples.
Yeah.
I'm loving my two examples, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'll give two examples. One is, and I think anyone in property management will know this. So we were all on rest for a very long time. Some people were on console. I'm really not sure. And then Property Tree came out. And it had a lot more AI and a lot more interactive components to it. It was a lot quicker. It had a lot of transparency, which was obviously really good from a business owner's point of view.
Yeah.
But from a property manager's point of view, it also had a lot of options for systemizing and making things a lot clearer and a lot easier for them. The grief cycle begins with because I was on rest for 16. Well, I'm not 16. I hadn't been in the business for 16 years, but we'd been as a business on rest for 16 years.
Okay.
So they have like every now and then a bit of a change. Not many, by the way,
Yeah.
but they did. So it was very little, and everyone could stomach it. Property Me, when they said, right, we're going to transition everything, all of your properties are going to come across. And for some reason, I had in my mind this optimistic view, which I am optimistic, but I'm also very risk management, and I normally ask a lot of questions. At this particular time, hard on sleeve again, made a mistake. I was like, wow, yeah, this is amazing. Team's going to love this. And the salesperson in me came out. I was like, oh, and I was just sold by the salesperson.
Yeah.
So when I went to the team and said, and I sold it, this and this and this and this, look, these are going to be the pain points. Minimal.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit uncomfortable. Minimal. Didn't really give a strategy about how we were going to approach it, change over, all of those things, which they said they would give to me, which they did, which was minimal at the time and not enough. When we actually changed over to Property Me, our team had to do the work that they usually do, and my team are quite structured in terms of they carry a lot of properties because they can.
Yep.
And they're very good at what they do. So they're not managing 100, they're managing 180 to 280 to 400 properties, some of them with a field agent, yes. So when you bring in a new software package, and they were skeptical, but they were like, Donna's got this, Donna's got us. And yeah, this was a really hard learning for me and a big grief cycle for them. I didn't go on the grief cycle only because survival mode again.
Yeah.
But basically the transition didn't go across as I hoped. So there was a lot of work in back end. So then I ended up having to work out all of the things and tasks we needed to do for this system to work the way it was going to be optimized and work efficiently in the best way for us. That was extra work for them to be able to do that. And they were working out of a system they didn't know.
Yeah.
That was really difficult. So the grief cycle, if anyone knows about a grief cycle, I mean, I'm not an expert in it, but basically there was disbelief.
Yeah.
There was, I'm not doing this. Then there was anger. And then there was like, oh, I have to do this. And then there was like, this is the shit. Like, this is
How
awesome.
good is it? Yeah.
But that grief cycle took a year, like over a year. That's a long time for property managers to be in that space. It's generally, and I'm not saying all property managers are like this, it's not generally their personality type. So I didn't lose any property managers at that time, but I had some very angry. The culture was at its worst,
Yeah.
and they weren't connecting with me. They were very, very angry with me.
Yeah. Not many people like change. I mean, it would happen in anything, right? So, if you start changing things up, it feels too...
What I've learned from that though, Ben, yes, change, but now with change, I supersonically ask a lot of questions, and yes, there's still going to be pain points, but I'm going to have a lot more information. I'm going to be able to prepare them beforehand. So I would have, in retrospect, stayed on rest. I would have had a champion working out of one portfolio who had the smallest portfolio, or the person who's just mental and just gets things done in 4 days. I would have done that in retrospect, and moving forward, that's what I will do and what I have done.
Yeah. No, very good. And so did you lose many clients off the back of this change? I guess that's the most important side. Were they unhappy with it? Was there problems on that front?
It's interesting, I am optimistic, aren't I?
Yeah, you certainly are.
We actually didn't lose. I didn't actually expect to. This is what, when you asked that question, I'd never thought about it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like thinking. I actually never thought that I'd lose them, because I just thought, oh my God, this is going to be amazing for them. But it's a good question, because my older clients who have the folder, who have all of their statements in the folder, and they're used to the rest ledgers. And sorry, I don't want to go into technicality because you'll be bored,
very
because you love
simple.
sales.
Yeah,
and this is just the first property management thing, so I don't want to bore you. But the ledgers are completely different in Rest than they are in Property Me, which was incredibly challenging for some of our rental providers, and they wanted to go back to the old ways. So me talking them through that and working with them on that was very difficult. The other thing that was very difficult is they were sending links, and the links only lasted for a certain period of time. So people who like to print things and keep things in their, like they file things in their inboxes, that was a challenge. So working with Property Me and working with our clients was very challenging. Did I lose people? I'd say I did, but I didn't know. You know those ones, I'm renovating, I'm selling, so I'm sure I did, Ben, if I'm realistic, but no one actually said I'm leaving because of that. And I thought they would love a portal. They never had a portal where they could see things. But you've got to realise that everyone has different values. Some people don't want to even look at a portal. It's like, that's your job.
No, I understand that. Do you think, the next question from my end, is there any business decisions that you regret making over your journey? Is this one of those, do you think, or was it, or are there anything else?
It wasn't a regret. It definitely wasn't a regret. The way, regrets are really...
It's not positive like you.
What regret means to me is something like, so I don't really regret anything, but in terms of a mistake that I made that impacted the team and impacted the business, that I would never do again, was I went to one of the seminars that was held by our corporation, and there was an amazing speaker. She was incredible, but she was an owner. She wasn't a general manager of property management. She wasn't a property manager. And so when she was speaking from a place of what she saw was happening. But when you granularize things and you break things down, it was a really poor decision, because when we changed over to a software before Property Me, and it was an excruciating experience, and it was excruciating for the team. It was really bad for my clients. One of my clients, who is also a really, really good friend of ours, who has 60 properties with us, was receiving, I'll give you an example, he was receiving, with 60 properties, was receiving like 100 texts a day. And it's like the information, like it was just not customized. I had no idea this was going on. I went to dinner with him and he said, Donna, I really respect you and it's your business. He said, but I need to go off that software. I'm not leaving you, but you need to take me off the software. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I'm getting 60 texts a day and I'm getting all of these emails. And I said, what do you mean? So I literally had no idea on the impact of our end user, which was a rookie's mistake, like just beyond, really. It's quite embarrassing. But I don't regret it, because I've learned so much from that, but I regret the impact to my clients.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I mean, there's a lot of automation that causes more problem than good, in my opinion, certainly from my experience, because, that just follows simple step by
Yes.
step, but it doesn't take into consideration, the client in the other end, whether or not they're interested in getting all this information. And, there's a whole lot of talk about the AI space and how wonderful it's going to be. It may be wonderful for 40, 50% of your portfolio, but the other 50% of your portfolio probably won't like it too much. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in that space anyway over the next few years.
I agree with you completely. That's 100% true. But and it's not a but, with the automation, it depends on what sort of automation it is. So regionally here, and it might be different for other businesses, and look, we're nearly close to 1,300 properties. So this would be different for people with 2,000, 3,000, 7,000. You have to automate. Like you just have to, because you couldn't run a business. It would cost you too much. So I get that. And people in that space get used to it. But regionally here, it is about relationships and contacts, and people want to talk to you. They want to ring you, or they want a personal email. So you are 100% correct there, Ben.
Yeah.
With regard to AI, what's so exciting for us is it's actually helping us do things quicker. So, the chat GBT. Instead of my girls having to figure out how to actually respond to a complaint, they'll put in complaint, blah, 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 blah. It'll come up with how to actually handle it, and then they personalize it.
Yeah.
But it actually is, in my words, an extension of me and my caring, and those things are so much easier, especially with people who are 25, 26, 30.
Yeah.
They don't know how to speak to people who are 50 or 60 or what have you, and they can speak in that language, which is incredibly important because people need to be heard from their space.
Absolutely.
So that's a place where I'm excited by it.
Yep.
But I agree with you, when things are automated, sometimes the relationship's lost.
We wrote some software for our business, and it was all about, setting out push notifications when things would go wrong, and this, that, and the other. And on Christmas Eve, I will still never forget this. Notifications started going off every 8 minutes. I couldn't get onto our software developer, and every single client on the books was getting notifications every 8 minutes. I've never wanted to try it more in my life. Anyway, we got through that.
It's a lot, Ben.
Yeah. Anyway, we won't go
Loving
back.
you.
That's trauma that I've parked that we won't go back to. Now, are you able to give us some advice that you would give to anyone entering into the property management space now?
Absolutely. So anyone who's wanting to get into property management, know that it's a career. Ask lots of questions. I would also say your first thing you need to do is go and do the course.
Yep.
Get into the course, and then I would contact agencies that you feel aligned with or that you've heard good things about. I would ring them. You might not get through to someone like me straight away or what have you. I would ask them lots of questions. I would ask to have work experience with you. I'm not talking about this work for free thing or anything like that so someone can take advantage of you or anything like that. I think it's about going out and saying, look, I'd really like the experience. Would you mind if I could, do that? And with my team, we do that, and we've done that a lot. So they'll go out and do a routine inspection with a team member, a condition report. They'll go out and do an open for inspection. They'll sit with me and I'll have a bit of a chat with them, and it'll give you a feel for whether it's even up your alley or it's even anything that you might want to be doing. And then also what you get a feel for is the culture and the energy and the people that you potentially might be working with. And then you could also, my next thing is once you've actually got a job, find a mentor or someone who you aspire to be, or someone who's just like does things in a way that you're just like, wow, I really want to do that, and lock yourself in with that person.
Yep.
And that is the biggest advice I can give you, because if you do that, you will enjoy what you're doing, you will learn a lot quicker, and you will learn a lot happier.
It seems to be reoccurring feedback from all the podcasts we've done over the last few weeks. Find a good mentor. So maybe there's some method in that. So thank you for sharing. Normally we finish with a rapid fire question in the sales space, but obviously we have the property management expert here today. What piece of advice would you give to investors out there, landlords, rental providers, whatever we're going to call them today, and tenants when they're applying? Because obviously it's a point of contention, it's a discussion point. How can they get properties that they're applying for?
So I'll start with the renters.
Yep.
Make sure that your application is fully complete and you have all information. I would put even more information, like talk about your dog, talk about your family, talk about anything that's actually going to put you ahead of someone else. Because when we're relaying information to a rental provider, the more information and the more personalized they can actually feel about you, the more comfortable they're going to be about you moving into the property. But one of the things that is a pitfall for a lot of people who are putting in their applications is they're not putting in all documentation required, which means we have to chase it up, which means other people who have all of their documentation in there will go ahead of you.
Yep.
So that's my main takeaway for renters. Mm-hmm. For rental providers, contact me, because I can give you a 15 question list that you need to ask any agency so that you can actually make the right decision on who you're actually going to go ahead with. And 15 is too long to talk about here.
Yep.
But the 15 are all important. There's not 3 or 2, my special 2.
Yeah.
You really do need to know who you're going with. And what happens with rental providers is you're very busy. You just want it done. You just want it leased. You're under pressure, obviously, to get it leased. And so the first person who answers the phone generally is the first person who get it is they're reasonably competent. It's not the best road to go down. Give yourself time. Say to yourself, right, I'm going to ring at least 5 agencies and see who gives you the right feedback. But you do need a certain amount of questions. If you don't have my 15, go online. There'll be questions that you should ask. Just do your due diligence. It can save you a lot of money and a lot of pain.
For property managers answering the phone every single time, it means that they're not busy enough, so they probably don't have a huge amount of experience, right? So, and I would say that
sometimes,
yeah,
or they're overstaffed, which is just not a thing at the minute.
Yeah, true. Donna, that's pretty much it for us today. We really appreciate you coming on today. This has been a great discussion, obviously right up my alley, given the property management background, but love what you're doing in the space and obviously dominating your marketplace out there. And again, thank you very much for supporting Homely.
Thanks so much, Ben. I've really appreciated having the opportunity and chatting with you.
Excellent. We'll see you soon.
Before you go, please hit follow, like and subscribe to make sure you have me and my next guest back in your ears in 2 weeks' time. Until then, make sure you share this episode with your friends and colleagues, find details and resources in the show notes, and get in touch via Homely socials with any questions. That's at homely.com.au on Insta, Facebook and TikTok.